sunny days are gone, I'm a-going home.
Good morning and welcome. I'm Axel Ricourt-Dumas, I'm partner at EY Faber-Novel. I'm very pleased to open this conference on the decarbonization of aviation. That is the third part of the Augmented Infrastructure study that we started 3 years ago with the Ardian Infrastructure team. Today, we will present to you key figures, our key conviction. We will share concrete initiatives, and we will debate around 3 panels on the key levers for the decarbonization. First, data and optimization of operation. Second, the alternative fuels. And finally, the new role for airports. To start, I'm very pleased to welcome Matthias Burghardt, who is member of Ardian Executive Committee and head of Ardian Infrastructure team.
Merci. Merci, Axel. I need my glasses, and now I remember. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this third conference on the augmented infrastructure. Unfortunately, Dominique Sénéquier, the CEO and founder of Ardian, cannot be with us today, but I would like to thank her for her continuous support in our efforts to bring innovation and sustainability at the core of our asset management strategy. We had put together the Augmented Infrastructure Framework in 2018 as a strategic compass to guide us in the necessary transition of infrastructure to better serve the needs of our users and the new imperative facing us, and first of all, the fight against climate change. As we meet today, eyes around the world will be on the discussion at United Nations Climate Change Conference, COP27, at Sharm el-Sheikh. Yet, according to the latest emissions gap report from the UN, environmental program progress since Glasgow COP26 last year are disappointing. New national climate promises and policies are well behind that necessary to have a chance of limiting warming to 1.5 degrees centigrade. Well, technology is working well now? Yeah. The energy and climate crisis remind us the pressure we have to quickly transition our economy to less dependent on fossil fuels, and this is all the more true for the aviation industry. This year, we choose to focus on the decarbonization of the aviation industry in order to reach the critical target of net zero aviation by 2015. This is an existential challenge for this industry, which rapid growth is more and more questioned. Ardian Infrastructure, a world-leading investor in infrastructure, we focus in 3 essential sectors: energy, transport, and telecom. As a long-term investor, it is crucial for us to anticipate the long-term trends and challenges facing our societies and hence the critical infrastructure which are the backbone of the economies. We are committed to this change as we are convinced that environmental inefficient assets will become obsolete. It's our duty as an investor to safeguard the long-term value of our assets. As long-term investor, our investment thesis is centered on the necessary transition of our economy to a more sustainable and resilient state. First, we invest in accelerators of energy transition. Obviously, we won one of the pioneers investors on the renewable energy, and we have today 7.6 gigawatts of capacity of renewal around the world. But also on new technologies like hydrogen, batteries, and other assets that we believe are critical component of the energy transition. We are very proud to have set up Hy24 with our partner 5T, a joint venture who manage the world's largest clean hydrogen infrastructure in the world. We are also encouraged the deployment of hydrogen-based solution in our airports, and I will let Andrea Andorno to tell you more about the achievement of Turin Airport in a few moments. Second, we develop and transform companies with current fossil fuel exposure into energy transition leaders. 2 years ago, we acquired Nevel, a leading Nordic district heating. Since we became investor. We replaced hydrocarbon fuel boilers with biofuel solution to reach carbon-free energy production by 2030. Another very symbolic example is Geocell. Geocell is the largest oil strategic storage in France. We have decided to invest 500 million euros to adapt Geocell current facilities to be able to produce, store, and transform clean hydrogen and therefore mitigate oil decline. So asset resilience is a key topic for us as we're making the energy transition a top priority of our investment thesis. Third, we are convinced for many years of the power of data intelligence to help our traditional infrastructure transition to augmented one. So the idea is for those infrastructure to be more efficient operationally, more flexible and more able to adapt to changes in user needs, more resilient and able to absorb increasing external shock and uncertainty, and most of all, more sustainable and able to control and adapt on their negative externalities. This is a key thesis behind our augmented infrastructure strategy, which we formalized in 2018. Our data science team have now developed several tools supporting our strategy, such as Opta is a data platform to monitor and operate our global renewable portfolio around the world, Car Carbon to monitor the emission generated by our highways networks, and Air Carbon, a pioneer platform to monitor in real time the Scope 3 emissions on airports in order to be able to design and implement realistic decarbonization strategies and measure them. Indeed, as part of our efforts to support sustainable trajectory for our portfolio asset, which has been led together with Ardian Sustainable team, we came to the conclusion that airport Scope 3 emissions, i.e. emissions driven by landing, takeoff, or airplanes, taxi times, ground handling, passenger commuting to and from airports, represent circa 95% of airport emissions, but this is very difficult to assess. We thus needed our own tool, co-developed with our airports, and this is how we built Air Carbon, which we first presented to you in 2019 as a pilot project and is now fully deployed in Milan, Turin, and Naples airport. We will show you a video later on to present it. Even though airports are not the largest direct emitters of carbon emissions, they should play a role, a catalytic role, in the decarbonization of the sector, as they are the core of the aviation industry and have therefore a key role to play in the reduction of the industry emission. Acting on Scope 3 emission is thus the key to drive this change. While certain voices are already calling for a stop or a cap to air traffic, and others only believe on technological miracles could save us, we believe in a third approach. A more sober approach can only be combined with existing technologies and data intelligence, which can already impact positively operations today, while further change at scale are necessary for the years to come, especially regarding sustainable fuels and electrification to replace hydrocarbon molecules, which today fuel the transportation industry. This is why that augmented airports can be the catalyst of the transition of the sector. Today we will discuss those different topics. I was mentioned by Axel in the three panels that she just mentioned. So I would like to warmly thank all the participants of our panels today for their key inputs in this conference. And now I will leave the floor to Edouard Bertagna, Senior Investment Manager, and Skander Kamoun, Data Scientist at Ardian Infrastructure. They will present you the main result of our study for a net zero aviation.
At Ardian, we're investing into airports. Airports are really at the center of the whole aviation value chain. It is the place where passenger, airlines, aircraft manufacturer, ground handling companies, air traffic controller, energy supplier, and public authority are all meeting together. For this first study of the augmented infrastructure that will be released today, we decided to tackle not an easy topic, the question of the decarbonization of the aviation and how it can become net zero. In practice, more than 90% of the CO2 emissions are not directly coming from the airports. However, it's a problem that we need to tackle all together, all of the actors, and it's our duty as investors to work on it. We do not have the pretensions to have all of the answer today, but we believe in the fact to act now. But just to start on a common definition, what does net zero mean? It means the complete removal, as much as possible, of all of the CO2 emission of the aviation sector. But Skander, can you tell us why is it actually important?
Sure. Well, despite the COVID crisis that slowed down air traffic growth, IATA still expects that we will reach 10 billion passengers in 2050. And this will mainly be driven by Asia, Africa, and Latin America. So the question is now, can we afford such a growth? And if yes, how? And at what cost? In a world where climate change is becoming a more and more burning issue every day, this has become the real priority for the aviation industry. But first, let us look at what is the situation now. What is the contribution of the aviation industry in the global emissions? Well, experts seem to be converging on the fact that the aviation industry today represents about 3% of global emissions. You may think this is a small figure, right? Actually, it hides two things. The first one is that the air transport industry is probably one of the most difficult to decarbonize. Why? Well, making things fly is both at the very heart of this industry and something that emits a lot of carbon. And second, this figure that you see here is a static one. But what if we look at it dynamically? What if we put ourselves in 2050 and the air transport industry has done nothing to decarbonize? Well, in that case, we would end up in a world where the air transport industry would represent 22% of global emissions. So we have to think about the levers we have at hand, and we have to think about them now.
So first angle to look at it is to consider more sobriety with constant technology. It's already happening. Started in 2018, you have the flight shaming movement. It already had impact. It is estimated that one out of four French, American, and German are already considering reducing their usage of air transport. So that's people. But then you also have government. Earlier this year, the Dutch government decided to put a cap at Amsterdam Schiphol Airport, one of the biggest one in Europe. That cap on traffic is 12% below the level before COVID. So that means less flight. So that's the first angle to look at it. But then you also have a second angle that you need to consider. The aviation has a massive impact both on the economy, but also from a social perspective. If the aviation sector were a country in terms of GDP number, that would be the Netherlands, the whole country. Just in France, where we are, more than 1 million jobs depends directly or indirectly to the aviation sector. And then also you're going to need massive technological investment and massive improvement in order to decarbonize the sector. And for that, more than 1.5, that's an estimate, but still more than 1.5 trillion euros are going to be needed until 2050 to decarbonize the industry. So that's the second angle to consider. But we also believe that there's a third angle, a third approach that needs to be considered.
Indeed. At Ardian, we believe in the need of a third approach, one that combines both ways of thinking that Edouard just presented to you. Why? First, let's think about a world where we wouldn't change our travel habits. This could have serious consequences on the climate, especially in the short term. Because today, there is no technology mature enough to drive a significant reduction of aviation carbon footprint in the next 5 to 10 years. Now, let us think about the other option, the one where our only lever would be to change our travel habits. Where we may have a positive impact in the short term with this lever. However, since no efforts would have been put in order to invest in technologies for the transition, the marginal carbon footprint of one single passenger will still remain the same. In other words, we would never reach net zero. So, with that said, what is our action plan? Well, let us look at this path to net zero coming from ATAG, which is sometimes referred as the reference by many players in the industry. Well, what you see here on the graph is that if we do nothing, the trajectory would reach 1.9 billion tons of CO2 emissions in 2050. This is a huge number, but we do have the means to reduce it. First, what we could do is rely on improvements on aircraft technology and optimizing operations. This would allow us to save about 0.6 billion tons of CO2 emissions. Then, we can even go further. We can rely heavily on sustainable aviation fuels, and this would allow us to save another 1.1 billion tons of CO2 emissions. Well, the rest, which would represent a minority, could be compensated through market-based solutions. And this is how we would get to net zero. So you see that the path to net zero comes from multiple levers, but all these levers represent new challenges for the industry.
Indeed. So on the short term, as Skander says, sustainable aviation fuel, also called SAF, are really seen as the solution. But why? At least for two reasons. In terms of reduction of emission, the impact could be massive. We could have a reduction up to 70% of the whole life cycle emission of an aircraft. Second, if you want to do long-haul flight, for the moment, that's the only technology available to do it. However, with that come a lot of challenges. Firstly, to have a common definition of what is called sustainable, to actually make this fuel all around the world, still need to be worked on. The second thing is that why those fuels are actually sustainable is because of the feedstock, what they are made of. And then comes the question of how it's competing with other sectors. And finally, you're going to need massive investment and massive industrial scale-up in order to meet with the demand. It is estimated that more than 300 million tons of SAF will be needed in order to decarbonize the sector. That's 3,000 times more of what we have today. On the longer term, you also have the hydrogen plane. So basically, why is it sustainable? Well, because the hydrogen is produced from a clean way, and then the whole cycle is actually sustainable. And Karen Guénon from Airbus will present you that more in details into the second panel. It also comes with a lot of challenges. This beautiful plane is not yet flying. It's supposed to be ready by 2035 for the first commercial plane. Also, you're going to need very strong investment both to build those aircraft, to create all of the supply chain, and then to integrate them within an airport facilities. Finally, you also have ground operation where a lot can be done.
Yes, airports will have to transform massively to welcome the usage of hydrogen. But already today, at Ardian, together with our partners and the airports in our portfolio, we are thriving to expand the idea that airports should be at the very center of technological innovation and progress. So much is already done today to optimize operations, and so much is still to be done tomorrow. Take the example of electrification of ground vehicles. Only this small initiative could help us completely remove the carbon coming from aircraft handling. So we know that our ambition is big, but we do believe that such a global challenge needs to put in place the appropriate efforts. And to us, these efforts should be made towards two directions. The first one would be to be able to monitor the carbon impact of all these initiatives and be able to know each and every day where we are at in our global journey toward net zero. And second, we believe that we have to benefit from the central position of the airports to be able to drive a strong impulsion in the industry among all the stakeholders to collaborate together, to share more, to reduce faster. That is why we built Air Carbon, that we believe is a revolutionary tool regarding these two aspects. And here is why.
Today, we all agree that carbon reduction should be everyone's priority. As part of our long-standing support to our portfolio assets on sustainability, we came to a very simple observation. There is no carbon emission reduction plan that can be realistically conceived without a granular and dynamic view on where these emissions stand today.
Without a very granular level of information on operations, all airports will fail in properly measuring the evolution of their carbon footprint.
Air carbon is the next generation platform for airports to efficiently manage their carbon emission. It is a pioneering tool because it relies on real-time operational data coming directly from the airports and also enables forecasts for carbon trajectories. Air carbon is currently designed along two main features. The first one is Air Carbon Estimate. With Estimate, the emissions of every single flight operating on the airfield are done automatically. All the computing work that airports used to do before is now performed automatically via Air Carbon, and this includes landing and takeoff cycles, taxi operations, auxiliary power units, and ground service equipment.
Air Carbon Estimate has driven a dramatic change in the way we estimate carbon emission at Turin Airport. Air Carbon Estimate is helping us reach new milestones faster, as Turin Airport is expected to reach the Airport Carbon Accreditation Certification Level 3 this year, using the output coming from Air Carbon.
Together with the airports, we imagine projects, the second main feature within Air Carbon. Project gives a realistic view on how emission trajectories would react in the future. They depend on the decisions that the airport will take today and on the ones that they will be taking tomorrow.
We wanted project to be very straightforward for us, airport managers. We just need to upload the flight program or to let Air Carbon simulate one for us. Then it's just a matter of adjusting the different sliders to build various scenarios and see what the impact on emissions is for the next 6 months and up to the 10 years ahead. Having a tool relying on our operational to do it, this is what is truly revolutionary with Air Carbon project.
Large asset managers such as Ardian can fast-track projects like Air Carbon, from a proof of concept to a viable tool that can be shared across the portfolio in a short time frame. This is the age we have to make a difference.
Today, Air Carbon is already deployed on 4 airports: Milan Malpensa, Milan Linate, Naples, and Turin airports. And we look to expand it further to other partner airports beyond Ardian portfolio. In the future, we would like Air Carbon to become a central data platform around carbon emissions management.
As a matter of fact, since 2008, Ardian has been developing an extensive sustainability program. And as of today, we monitor the carbon footprint of our infrastructure assets, and 93% of them have a decarbonization action plan.
I believe that the real success of the product comes from the fact that Ardian has been co-developing the tool with us, the airport. We needed a tool built by the airport for the airport, and now we have it.
So many thanks, Edouard and Skander, for having shared with us this key conviction and key levers on the decarbonization, and also for this presentation of Air Carbon. We'll come back to this tool in the first panel that will be dedicated to data and optimization of operation. So to discuss about that subject, I'm pleased to welcome Michele Miedico, Fatima da Gloria de Sousa, Jean-Philippe Bojard, Pierre Junio, and Pauline Thompson. So welcome and thanks for your participation. I will start this panel with you, Fatima da Gloria de Sousa. You are VP Sustainability at Air France KLM. So as an international airline company, what are your key levers to reduce energy consumption and emission? And we talk a lot about eco-piloting. So what have you put in place and what are the savings related to that?
So good morning and thank you all for being here. I really like the introduction. It makes my life easier because you already mentioned the most important key levers. So indeed we have fleet renewal. Every aircraft that arrives has up to 20 to 25% less CO2 emissions. Sustainable aviation fuel, in fact, we are a little bit more demanding because we want a minimum of 75% reductions. And we are already seeing possibilities for around 80% of reductions for the SAF that we use. And indeed, the third element is operational efficiency. And in fact, we have been working on this already since 2012. We have very engaged staff. Our own pilots are making this almost like a bit of pride to have the minimum CO2 emissions on their flights. Recently, we also started working with partners. Pierre, no doubt, will talk about that also. What we see is that with Transavia, we have been able to achieve 3 to 5% of efficiency thanks to these type of measures. So looking at how do you optimize the flight, the departure, the speed at which you are flying, all of these options that we have. And to give you a little bit of an idea, what does that mean? So for Transavia, that means 80 tons of CO2 that we are not emitting, and that is one aircraft in the fleet that it's basically not emitting CO2. On the network carriers, we see about 2 to 3% of efficiencies, and this is, of course, because of the longer range of aircraft. In addition to optimization of the flights, we also do a lot around weights. And you may all remember the time that pilots would be using these heavy bags. No more, they have an iPad now. We have new galleys, new seats. Air France has changed its tableware from porcelain to melamine. We have data tools, artificial intelligence, looking at how much drinking water we should load. Everything to manage the weight on each and every flight, because again, weight will reduce the amount of fuel that we use. So we really have a fuel plan that is shared across the company, and where we target on a yearly basis how much fuel do we need to use and how do we bring it down. So that, in a nutshell, gives you a little bit the overview of what we are doing.
Thanks, Fatima. You mentioned your partners, and so we have two companies here providing solutions for airlines or airports. So Pierre Junio, you are founder and CEO of Safety Line, and Jean-Philippe Beaujard, you are CEO of Flight Watching. So I would ask you a bit the same question: which type of solution you provide to airline and or airport on flight or on ground operation, and how to scale up, how to go further in this solution? Maybe starting with you, Pierre.
Yes, good morning all. It's good to have such assistance, a big assistance, and looking at what we can do to improve our carbon reduction in aviation. So we at Safety Line, so we have joined CETA just 1 year ago, and our goal is really to use the data that are available, because aviation is one of the biggest producing a massive quantity of data. For example, an aircraft will actually record 1,000 parameters per second. And what is really important is to be able to do something with those data to make them actionable. That's why we mix different skills in our company to actually apply machine learning, but with a really operational goal to provide all the operators, so starting with the pilots for the eco-flying, actually optimizing the flights during the different phases. So starting with the climb, that is a very big part of the fuel consumption for an aircraft. And this is how because data are available, data are there is a large quantity, but the real thing is to be able to turn those data into actions and use new technologies, because aircraft have been designed quite a while ago now. And like Fatima said, using new technologies like tablet, iPads on the aircraft is actually providing a great opportunity to bring actually very accurate information into the cockpit and make it work for the pilot. Another area where we are working at is on airport. We have partners with Aéroport de Paris since 2013 to be able to see and something similar to what has been shown with air carbon, is looking at how we can use the data from the actually operational data from the radar from the ground and in the air, in order to be able to identify and also optimize the way the aircraft are moving on the ground during taxiing, but also sequencing the aircraft. So, and here there is a big challenge, is to be able to unlock all the different silos that are actually currently existing, being able to share the information between the different partners on the airport, and to be able to really improve the operations and using the data in real time. And this is something that also can help reduce significantly, because we see that on the ground there is kind of inefficiency between 10 and 20% of, let's say, taxi time, taxi distance, and so on. So this is really important to have make the best use of those data in a day-to-day operation.
Thank you, Pierre. Jean-Philippe, you're also providing solution. Is it on the same phase, or is it complementary to what Pierre mentioned?
Yeah, it's quite complementary. Actually, we're doing ground power optimization, okay, what we call GPO. And that's using aircraft data. You know, aircraft data is available recorded when it's recorded, like on a black box. So, but you can't read that data until the aircraft lands after, okay? It also sends real-time data, but that, again, is not available because the first data set you get is after the takeoff. Okay, so there's a sort of blackout period on the ground until the engine is on. And that's where we come in, because we're actually experts of the protocol that is used between the ground and the aircraft. And we use that protocol to interrogate the aircraft and get key parameters from the aircraft while it's on the ground so that we understand how the aircraft is behaving. And one of the key features we're doing for net zero aviation is the fact of monitoring the EPU. Flight watching is in Revima Group now since 2019. And Revima Group is one of the most important MRO shops, independent MRO shops in the world. So we're experts of APU. And we can optimize the key data that we capture around the aircraft to optimize the usage of the APU and create actions. And that's a short-term win today. So, because there's no modification of the aircraft needed, there's nothing needed. The protocol is there, all you need is software. So we've developed this actually and put it on the market this year, and the results were quite astonishing. Our customers asked us, they wanted to know how much time the APU was actually running. And in fact, they put a threshold of about what they suspect to be an alert, okay? And they found out that, in fact, the APU was running 2 times that, an average 2 times that amount. That means that there's about 50% of overrun potential. Out of that 50% overrun, we can work remotely on that subject with alerts. Today, we were quite efficient, and the short-term win on that part of the overrun is around 30%, okay? And we intend to go further. So that means globally for the APU, around 15% saving on the thing. So that's a lot of carbon too, because a turnaround is about 1 ton on an A320. So, I mean, that's a quick win that we should use. And maybe the next step would be scale on airports.
That's good transition for Michele. We know that the airports are impacted by the aircraft movement, which is most of their Scope 3 emission. So you are head of the environment at GESAC and in charge of the Salerno project, the new airport that will be open in 2024. There is an interesting plan on changing the way you monitor takeoff and landing with new type of data. From satellite rather than ground. Can you elaborate on that and explain how have you done that? I think maybe it was a bit complex to put in place. And what do you expect from that in terms of savings?
Yes, good morning to everyone. Actually, Salerno is a small airport 70 kilometers in south of Naples, and we are performing some major works there in order to improve the existing infrastructure, because in the next future, Salerno Airport will be as like a second runway of Naples Airport, and we will operate there almost 6 million of passengers. So the works includes the runway extension, the construction of new apron stands, and as well the building of 2 new terminals, one for the general aviation, another one for commercial traffic. So due to the fact that we are building this airport from the basement, practically from zero, we are now adopting all the up-to-date technical solution in order to be more sustainable. For example, the airport will be provided with a remote control tower as one of the first in Italy. And for these reasons, we are updating all the flight procedures in Salerno. And rather than going to install new antennas on the ground, we are using data coming from global navigation satellite systems. So this means that we can optimize the tracks, the arrivals and departure path in order to shorten the flight time. And at the same time, we can as well have a better integration with the Naples ATC that is very close. At the same time, designing the new terminals, we are applying now the newest digital solution that are on the market. For example, we're using biometric systems to monitor and to smooth the passenger flow, and at the same time to control the energy and the consumption of the buildings. So we can have a smart building and have less emission, and at the same time we can provide as well a more pleasant journey for the passengers.
And more generally, do you have other initiatives to reduce emission from airlines, notably in Naples, with the use of air carbon or other type of initiatives?
Yes, of course, in Naples we are going to be accredited hopefully this year at 4+. And then we are working a lot even for the Scope 3 emissions reduction. So we did a lot of implementation. First is, of course, the full application of the ACDM. ACDM means Airport Collaborative Decision Making. That is the sharing of data from the different stakeholders that comes from the black box, as we see, from the radars, in order to have a better planning of the operations and to avoid queues on the departure process and to reduce taxi time. Second important thing is to provide all the aircraft stands with the equipment to give energy and air conditioning to the aircraft. In this way, the pilot may completely switch off the auxiliary power unit, and this way can save fuel and, of course, do less emissions and noise. Then we are now building a new photovoltaic plant in order to give green power to the electric vehicles on the ground. So we are just leading the change of all the fleet operating on the ground from normal cars to electric ones. So this means that we will self-product green energy and give to the handlers this energy in order to save CO2 emission. And maybe one of the most important initiatives that we made is the update of a new initial crime procedure using the global navigation satellite system. So at the moment, there was only one procedure that goes just in the middle of Gulf of Naples, and then the aircraft going to north has to do a very big change and turn and go up. So we provided with new technology, new initial climb procedures that go straight to the north. This means that we can save almost 3 to 5 minutes of flight time, and this is translated in a yearly saving of almost 11,000 tons of CO2 emissions and almost 500 hours of flight time, simply letting all the aircraft turning right and going up to the north.
Okay. Thanks a lot. All of you talk about tools and the necessity to have collaborative tools. Pauline, you are director at Ardian and head of digital innovation. We saw the video on air carbon, so there have been a big journey since its creation. What does it provide today, and In your view, what is missing in terms of data? Do we need to break some silos to really have the tool at scale?
Yes. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, as was mentioned in the video, we started Air Carbon in 2018, first as a student project. We wanted to have more granularity and a better view on the Scope 3 emissions of our airports, because for us it was a bit of a black box, and it represents more than 95% of carbon emissions for airports. So we first built the model on publicly available data for a well-known international airport. And just to see if the model was running and if we could follow the ACA program's guideline, which is the industry reference for calculating carbon emissions. And then with these results, we went to see the teams at Milan, Turin, and Naples airports. Obviously, the model was lacking precisions at the time, but it had the merit of being there. And progressively, with the airports team, we built more precision into the tool. We were able to calculate more and more parts of the Scope 3 emissions. So Scope 3 emissions include landing and takeoff of aircraft, taxi time, ground handling, but also passengers commuting to and from the airports. And we are still, as mentioned in the video, really co-developing the tool with all the airports teams. Today, we have a good vision, and it's quasi real-time on landing and takeoff and on ground handling, because the model connects directly to the airport's traffic database. But we would like to have more precision in order to build trajectories for what the different stakeholders of the airports can build in terms of initiatives. As we mentioned, APU usage, optimization of aircraft trajectories, all the things that could help the airport simulate the impact on the short term and long term. That's part of the project functionality that we are building. But for that, we really need to break the silos in terms of data, and our ambition is for Air Carbon to become really a sort of central data platform for the airports, where they can collaborate with all the stakeholders and everyone can share their data. So airlines, service providers, aircraft providers, everyone to share their data and act collectively.
Thanks. So we've seen there's technology, data sharing, many levers to accelerate. What about regulation? The last question will be for you, Fatima. What is your view on the Single European Sky? What are the challenges to put it in place? But what could be the impact on this ramp up? And maybe if someone in the panel has another opinion, it will be interesting to debate, but interesting to have your view on that.
Yeah, thank you for this last question. Michele already mentioned that there is a way to organize the airspace. I was actually also quite surprised when I found out for the first time that aircraft are not just flying the most efficient direct route. They are corridors. So they're basically going through a labyrinth of corridors in the air that are invisible. In Europe, basically what does Single European Sky mean? It means borderless travel. It means that where today there is this national organization of airspace, and think civil airspace, military airspace, all of this, every country is doing this by themselves. And the ambition of the Single European Sky is that all the countries together in the European Union agree on a new organization of this airspace, and they call this functional airspace blocks, which of course requires civil and military cooperation, because they need to agree on how we organize the airspace. But secondly, you also need to talk about governance. Who is going to be in charge of that airspace? How do we arrange that air traffic management? How do we arrange liability if there is an incident or an accident? It's ultimately also a question of sovereignty. So these are difficult political conversations. They have been going on for, I don't know, 30 years, if not more. So it's really not easy to solve, but we are happy to see that this topic has come higher on the agenda, because there is a potential of up to 10% of CO2 efficiency. We're not talking small numbers here. So 10% of efficiency. So as Air France KLM, we are one of the major contributors in the CESAR projects. That means that we are continuously doing trials from gate to gate to see what happens if you do organize this in a different way. And earlier this year, we also participated in the Connecting for Europe days in Lyon, and we had all of our airlines doing their ideal flights with sustainable aviation fuel, but also working together with air traffic management everywhere to go indeed for the most efficient direct flights and then calculating what would be the possible gains from that. And on top of that, we are doing that also with our SkyTeam partners, where we organize now on a yearly basis the SkyTeam Flight Challenge. And we invite not only the regulators in Europe, but all over the world to see how can we contribute to organize air traffic management in a really new way, given that we really anticipate there is still a lot to gain from that.
So we saw in this panel that things are happening already today, is what we said, and it's a lever that is actionable today. We already use data, share data for real impact already. We also see that to go further, maybe we need more favorable regulation, more data sharing, maybe a new governance. So many thanks for all this input. Fatima, you will stay with me on stage as you will be part of the second panel, and I will invite the other speaker to go back to their seat. Many thanks again. So I will open now the second panel on the alternative fuels, so sustainable aviation fuel and hydrogen. So as you saw, according to the attack scenario, this is the main lever for decarbonization, more than 50% of the impact. At the forefront, sustainable aviation fuel, longer term, the hydrogen technology. What we will see in the panel is that we have a few challenges to overcome to scale and to put in place a real supply chain and the right level of renewable energy to produce these alternative fuels. So to discuss on that, I'm really pleased, side to Fatima, to welcome Andrea Andorno, Edward Arkwright, Pierre Hamelin, Pierre-Étienne Franc, Karine Guénan, and Matthias Burghardt. We need a lot of discipline. So thanks all of you. So as you can see, it's a rich panel. It's a really a strong ecosystemic approach. We wanted to have all the players on this key subject. We'll start with you, Karine Guénan. You are the VP of the Zero H2 ecosystem of Airbus, managing all the project around hydrogen at Airbus. With a central role on this ecosystem, what is your view on all the key levers that Edouard and Skander presented to us? What is the maturity for all of them? And especially, what is the place of alternative fuels, according to you, and in Airbus strategy?
What a question. Good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here with you and be already inspired by the talks earlier this morning, and for the Ardian team to be grateful to have gather us here this morning, as well as setting the scene through the attack and the various information shared about what it means to decarbonize aviation, so-called hard-to-abate sector. The moment today is about the fight for net zero for aviation. Let me guide you to fly the journey towards net zero for aviation. At Airbus, we set ourselves a big ambition to lead the journey to decarbonize our industry. And there is no single silver bullet solution. All the solutions, what you call the third pathway, is much needed in order to achieve net zero. What it means concretely is first, refleeting aircraft worldwide. I'm not sure you're conscious that today, on the global aircraft fleet in service, still 80% are from the latest, not the latest generation. So it means that we can, by simply refleeting aircraft fleet in service, have a big impact on the CO2 emission. Second is about SAF. You mentioned it earlier. This is a big lever in order to decarbonize our sector. View from today, already 50% of SAF blending is certified on all Airbus aircraft. So it means that we can immediately, as of today, operate transition to SAF with a significant CO2 reduction. We at Airbus are committed not only to be satisfied with such 50% blending, but bring, by the end of the decade, the capability to blend up to 100% on our existing aircraft models. When talking SAF, it's about biomass sourced. It's been mentioned about the quality and sustainability of the feedstock. We also strongly believe that there will be, at some point, certain physical limit to access such feedstock, and that's the reason why we are also a strong believer in the means that green hydrogen can bring to produce e-fuels in quite unlimited manner, except, of course, securing our access to green electricity to produce such e-fuels, combining green hydrogen and CO2 capture with the direct air carbon capture solution, with this the solution to bring our operation to a net zero. And last but not least, obviously, I'm representing today here the zero emission initiatives from Airbus. We've set ourselves the ambition to bring to market zero emission flying experience to the market by 2035. It's not that could bring, we are committed to bring it to market by 2035. You said it earlier, it is a challenge. In our industry, we are used to the challenges. It's a technology challenge. We know how to set the standards, but it's a quite unprecedented challenge when it comes also not only to bring the technology to maturity, but as well as to deploy the right energy ecosystem, as well as infrastructure ecosystem, together with the aircraft. Because it's useless to bring such an aircraft to market if we don't have been able to deploy collectively the right infrastructure and the right access to the green hydrogen at the right price and at the right volume and places. And this challenge is exactly what we collectively represent today on stage. We are very conscious and we recognize that we won't succeed on our own. We need to form that cohort all together in order really to deploy timely this ecosystem in order to accompany the entry into service of the zero-E aircraft by 2035. And I'm sure my colleagues here will develop further.
Thank you, Karine Guénon, for this strong introduction and strong message. Fatima da Gloria de Sousa, considering the lever that Karine Guénon mentioned, I have two questions for you. The first, you mentioned the fleet renewal. So what does it mean? What is the implication for an airline company, notably considering the goal of 100% compatibility with SAF and considering also the future hydrogen aircraft?
So normally airlines, when they buy an aircraft, it's meant to fly for at least 20 years. So it is indeed a little bit of a puzzle how we are going to integrate new fleet coming in into the plan, knowing that maybe we need to accelerate certain developments that we have today. What we do know is that SAF and hydrogen will remain complementary. This is because hydrogen, due to the characteristics that it has, it is heavier, it is more voluminous. It does not have the same capabilities for long-haul flights. So we do expect that sustainable aviation fuels will stay in complement to hydrogen even when we look towards 2050. So I think that is a very important first conclusion to make. Secondly, if you look at sustainable aviation fuels, just to give you a little bit of background, we already saw from the study that the expectations are that we will be needing about 30 million tons by 2030. There are also some that are saying maybe 40 million tons by 2030. That means we need to go from 3 plants today to about 300 in 8 years. So that's quite an ambition we have. I always say, okay, if we have 3 major continents, each builds 100, hopefully we can make it. To bring it back to the airline, we are part of Clean Skies for Tomorrow. We are signatories. We have committed to 10% of SAF by 2030. And that, of course, will be a mix. It will be most of it still biomass-based. But we are also looking at how can we have more focus on hydrogen and evolutions in that area. And I do expect that we will see a period where there will be a combination of SAF, which is indeed, as Karin mentioned, fully drop-in. We hope that we will be 100% certified SAF by 2030, latest. So fully drop-in, no changes of technology, but we expect to see new hybrid solutions. That means not only electric aircraft, but electric motor with a hydrogen fuel cell, fully hydrogen fuel cells, or hydrogen combustion, indeed. And we will go through this period where we will need to see how this fleet renewal is going to develop. But yeah, definitely, whatever we do, we think SAF and hydrogen and all the hybrids in-betweens will remain important on the longer term.
And as you said, you have an ambitious target of 10%, which is above the official 6% target. So it's a positive message on your side. In this journey to alternative fuels, we know airport will be a key partner. So Edward Arkwright, you are Deputy CEO of ADP Group. I have 2 questions for you. So on the way you will support the emergence of these alternative fuels and hybrid solution, as Fatima mentioned. So on the first point, maybe on the sustainable aviation fuel, can you elaborate the initiative you have? I'm thinking about Le Bourget, notably, or experimentation or initiative with Airbus, or even in India, beyond Europe.
So good morning, everyone, and thanks a lot for this panel and these panels and this study. It's a great challenge, but it's a great ambition for us because we make a great job, which is allowing people to travel and continue to dream and to travel. So it's not a question of license to grow; it's a license to operate and license to make one of the greatest jobs that we can do. By saying that, on SAF, it is new for the airport because till now, energy was not a question for airport. Fuel was not a question in the operations. A lot of fuel, a lot of operators, easy to finance from a regulatory point of view, and so it was not a subject or not a challenge for us. Now we know that energy will be key in the competitiveness of an airport. Not only with one source of energy, but a lot of fuel, sustainable fuel, sustainable fuel, hydrogen, and a lot of need in terms of power and green electricity. That was not the case into the past. So we know that this challenge is key to face the future of our business and operation, and of course for our customer and my first customer. And so in Paris, CDG and Orly, the first challenge for us is, are we ready to welcome sustainable fuel? And the first good news is, yes, we are right now, because we have an hydrants network allowing us to welcome 10%, 5%, 15%, 20%, till 30% without any new infrastructures needs or new investments. The second answer is, can we propose to all the customers that are asking for the sufficient quantity of SAF? The answer is no, because we don't have enough production around Europe. It has been clearly explained. And we know that we have to convince European Commission, European states, European institutions to make the same effort and support that other countries and continents are doing as the United States. So with Air France, with Airbus, with a lot of, we are trying to convince all the European parties and politicians that we need this support. This support cannot be only money. It is a global framework, a global rules, stable rules, so a lot of ideas, and we can develop. And the last example, it is what you mentioned in Le Bourget, because today we have in Le Bourget 2 on the 3 fuel providers which can provide to all the customers as much as SAF as they want, and the demand is very high, higher and higher. In India, we are working with Airbus and Safran. We are operating in India, Delhi and Hyderabad airports. On how we can prepare the arrival of a lot of sustainable fuel in the Indian environment, not only for infrastructure, but also for production. And we are looking for, of course, the preparation of eSAF that has been already mentioned.
Okay, thanks for this answer on SAF. Looking at hydrogen, how far are you in the collaboration with the ecosystem on the hydrogen project, and what do you expect from this collaboration in terms of acceleration?
So I fully agree with what has been said by my colleagues, and thanks to Pierre-Etienne. In 2014, Pierre-Etienne explained to me that hydrogen is the future of aviation. And we are right now sitting at the same round table, and he explained me that we have to welcome hydrogen distribution station for cabs in CDG and Orly. We spent maybe 2.5 years to open 2 stations, but due to this experience, we have learned a lot from this experience. And sorry if I mentioned that, just to say that 6 or 7 years ago, we were working on this question, and we were already convinced that the combination between SAF, eSAF, and hydrogen is the future of our business and operations. I say the combination because as Karine and Gloria has explained, we need all of them. And the combination is not only long haul, mid haul, not only do we need hydrogen for SAF or eSAF, but also a short term, mid term, long term. Hydrogen is reality today in our airports for ground operations, for net zero mobility, which is one of the main components of the scope 3 emissions of an airport. So, and we know that we have to prepare the future. It is, what does it need? What do we need to welcome hydrogen on our airports? I explained that for SAF, everything is ready. For hydrogen, anything is ready. We need new infrastructure to produce, to make liquefaction, to know if will the hydrogen go directly or do we have to transform? What are the needs in terms of land, in terms of regulation, in terms of reglementation? How can we work with all the local environmental authorities to make this hydrogen a huge infrastructure welcome and not a new source of noise, problems, etc.? And so we are working with Air Liquide and Airbus on that. We have launched with Air Liquide a JV in order to make and to propose to all the airports around the world studies in order to see what are these needs and to prepare the future of hydrogen, because it will be not only for one airport, but a global network of airports.
Thank you. Pierre Hamelin, you are a Vice President on Hydrogen Partnership at Air Liquide. Edouard Arkwright mentioned the joint venture you are currently leading together. So can you elaborate on this joint venture, what you expect in terms of outcome for different horizons that Edouard Arkwright mentioned on hydrogen, and maybe more generally your view on partnership and your key milestone of the hydrogen roadmap at Air Liquide?
Thank you. Bonjour everybody. Thanks for hosting this event. 2 years ago, we had a view and some certainty. Now we have a vision and we are convinced. What has happened basically is that since these 2 years, we launched a great cooperation with ADP and Airbus, where we went through analyzing the situation of 30 airports in detail, what it means to bring hydrogen there, what it means for the infrastructure, what will be the scenario of building the capabilities, what will be the supply chain scenarios, arriving with truck, then eventually pipeline or local production, as Edward mentioned, liquefaction, distribution. And the conclusion of this study, which cost us thousands of hours, is for 90% of them it's feasible. And that's how we moved from a view with certainty to a vision with conviction. And now to come to your question, there is a very big challenge clearly for the airports in terms of perspective and projection. And that's why with ADP we are creating this engineering JV. The engineering JV is meant to support the airports to define their journey toward the hydrogen. As a first step, basically, to build a tailor-made picture meant for the airport to understand, as Edward mentioned, what does it mean in their ecosystem, in the country in which they are, in the land which is available, in the basin of industry in which they are. Concretely speaking, what does it mean for them? And build a high-level strategic picture which will enable the airports to project themselves. This will be for a couple of years. Karine then referred to 2035 as a key milestone. Approximately a decade will be needed for the airports to be ready fully for welcoming their hydrogen planes. And this decade will be broken down in 2 phases. First, where RGV can support them building a very detailed engineering picture in order to reach what I call a final investment decision, knowing exactly how much it costs in terms of energy, in terms of euro, in terms of land, in terms of time, and then accompanying them in making this investment happen and breaking basically all the infrastructures ready for 2035. So creating a strategic view for projection, preparing the decision to go up to FID, and then building the infrastructure. That's what the GW will be about, to help the airports in this journey.
So all of you mentioned some first initiatives, but also the key challenges we'll have to face. So we'll focus in the second phase of the panel on these challenges to overcome. We'll start with you, Andrea Andorno. You are the CEO of Sagat, heading the Torino airport. What are the specific challenges for a regional airport to support this move to alternative fuels? What have you tried to put in place to face that?
Okay, just hello everybody. Just a very short picture on regional airports and SAF. It is quite clear that that's the way. So regional airports are fully committed to actually embark in this very important change within the industry. It will take longer. So probably, I see it as talking to many regional airport CEO, a book and claim system could be the way for smaller airports to be part of the game within SAF. And that's very important also because we talk about size and also geography, because we know that the production of SAF is currently scattered around Europe, but we like actually, the airline industry itself is very interconnected. So to move forward, we do need actually a system such as the book and claim system to allow everybody everywhere to purchase SAF. So that's the first step. Secondly, which is more important to me, it's Turin Airport initiatives. Well, I'm very happy to see, because we are committed, seriously committed to reaching net zero, And so also during the COVID time, we sat down and really thought about it at Turin Airport. Therefore, looking at the airport at the center, it was shown on a slide previously, that's how we are working in Turin Airport. That's why talking about hydrogen will be in 2023, will be the first Italian airport, maybe Europe, to actually use green hydrogen as well as store green hydrogen within the airport facility. It's an R&D, very small project, but it's very important because it's a milestone in terms of regulations, because we need to move forward and make understand our regulatory authorities. We know safety is very important within the aviation industry. To understand hydrogen, it's a reality. Even if it's around the corner, even if it's a medium long-term target, we must start making them understand it's there. Altogether, we have then a major project, which is we are converting our heating capabilities with hydrogen-ready fuel cells. That will be starting in 2024. So Turin Airport will be an off-taker. So we'll be able to blend hydrogen with gas. So locally, we'll cancel. There will be no combustion anymore in terms of heating and cooling the airport. Altogether, we're producing some electricity. So no local pollution, and being ready to take hydrogen, green hydrogen at the airport premises. So we're moving a little forward, but we want to do it because we really want to show that it is a way. We truly believe that's the way for the aviation, and the airport are key players for that.
Okay, thank you. We will deep dive more in the challenge with you, Pierre-Étienne Franc, your co-founder and CEO of HY24. So dedicated to support the full value chain of hydrogen. So you have a global view on what we have to do on that. First question on the SAF. How do you think, how can e-fuel become competitive? And what are the challenges also in terms of production for the SAF?
So the good news on SAF is that I think out of the more than 300 initiatives towards net zero in the aeronautics industry, 30% are dedicated to SAF. So that's good. 50 airports, I understand, are capable to dispense SAF today. 30 airlines have announced commitment. Now it's still very small numbers because it's barely 2.6 billion gallons by 2026, maybe 7 by 2030. It's only a couple of % of the total needs. And it's suffering from a couple of issues. First, classical SAF are competing, of course, with the use of biofuel for thermal engines. And it's cheaper and easier to do than doing jet fuels with biomass. So, second, there is not enough biomass resources to basically feed even the 2030 goals. So I think we have a couple of chances is that the ban, we need to see as a global ecosystem, the global ban on thermal engine in Europe is going to redirect everybody to batteries and fuel cell. So it's going to be to free more space for you, I think. And second, of course, the other topic is that we will need to move faster to the famous RNFBO, so the SAF using hydrogen and capture of CO or biogenic CO2. The problem there is that, and I think Pierre would be better than me to explain that, the efficiency of the SAF process is still very, very bad. It's 30%. And some of the processes are still a little bit nascent. So what we need is a scale-up of the oil and gas industries to basically use and repurpose some of their refineries. It's starting with Total, BP, Chevron and a couple of others, but they need to move faster. We need probably also to unlock the capabilities to do cheaper hydrogen, and that's coming with the other use of hydrogen in the other segments. But it's a challenge. It's true that it's a challenge. But we are typically, as I-24, investing into one company called Hydrogen that is going to try to develop one of the largest e-fuel and sustainable aviation fuel project in the site of Gardanne, repurposing Gardanne. The project is called Innovera. If that project goes forward, it's mixing technologies to do hydrogen and converting biomass, recovering the CO, and doing sustainable aviation fuel. So you've got project at scale coming. Now the cost is still an issue, but I think that's the whole issue of the energy transition. Everybody will have to bear part of the overcost of the shift to new technologies. And then, of course, we have hydrogen, but we can say a couple of words.
Coming to hydrogen, so what is missing to accelerate this uptake in terms of production, in terms of supply chain, and also will we have enough green energy to produce green hydrogen? And Matthias certainly will, at the end of the panel, will have a view on that.
You know, we should not put everything on the shoulders of aeronautics. Huh? I'm sorry, but aeronautics is 1% or 2% of the emissions, and if we take a broader view of what could happen with the use of hydrogen in planes, if everything goes fine, maybe in 20 years we will have, let's say, 100 regional airports shifting a share of their planes to regional, which is going to represent, in total aggregated, maybe 5 to 10 million tons of needs of hydrogen. At the same time, the hydrogen growth is expected to move from 100 to 600 million tons. So the burden is not only on aeronautics. On the other side, we should also see the things in relative numbers. Today, electricity is 25 kilo terawatt hours. It's supposed to double in the next 30 years at least. And we are building every year in renewable almost 200 gigawatts of new capacity. What we're speaking about for 5 to 10 million tons is basically 25 gigawatts. So yes, it's big, but it's not so significant. Then the question is locally, because one of the criticism is to say, oh, we're going to need to do gigawatts of electrolysis and solar panel on wind next to Charles de Gaulle. Or if we take Atlanta, I think Atlanta would require, if you convert the whole Atlanta airport, it would require maybe 2,600 tons per day of liquid hydrogen. Good luck. Not so easy. We are not yet ready. But it's not going to happen like that. It's going to start with a small part of the fleets for medium range. It's going to start in regional airports. So it will be hundreds of units of 100 tons per day, which is 250 megawatt electrolysis. And so it's relatively normal size. It's very realistic and tangible. And it's going to be connected to the grid. It's not going to be connected to solar panel just next door, because at the same time, the grid will move with more and more renewable. So I don't think that those issues on hydrogen are significant. What is significant is that if you don't have the road transportation shifting to hydrogen at the same time, you will never have a drop of liquid hydrogen in the plane. Because you need the infra to deploy, to have a complete supply chain up and running flawlessly for customers for simpler things, which are trucks, bus, cars, intensive mobility. You need technology to continue to develop so that the fuel cell costs decrease, the reservoir costs decrease, all the supply chain systems decrease. And with that, you can decrease globally the cost of access of hydrogen to the airline industry. So what we need, and that's why we are very pleased that Airbus joins the fund. Because the fund will do some projects connected to airports, but the fund will not, in the time range we have, we will not invest in airplanes. But Airbus is sending a signal which is very strong, and Aéroport de Paris is the same, joining also the fund, that this is part of the overall shift of the energy system where everything, it's like a domino effect. If you don't convert the road mobility and the maritime, you cannot have enough available, cheap and competitive liquid hydrogen for airports. So that's what's needed now, and we're working on that, of course, with some projects done by Ardian.
So the ecosystem approach goes much beyond only the aviation sector. In this discussion, we focused a lot on Europe, but we know that most of the impact is outside Europe. Coming back to you, Pierre Hamelin, what is your view on how we can engage the global sector? Edouard Arkwright mentioned the initiative in India on SAF. How can we duplicate what we do in Europe more globally?
Thank you. I think if I look at the statements of IATA or ICAO, there are clear targets for 2050 for all regions. Some regions might have different maturity than others, indeed, but this business is truly global. What does it mean? It means basically that with the help of global companies, airports and the main routes will have to shift, and then the domestic players can benefit from that. In terms of perspective for me, globally, three things will matter to partner with is airports, airplane companies, and operators like Air France, so Airbus, Air France, and ADP, if I take the French case, but globally. because these companies will set the frame. They are the one who will be impacted and will adapt eventually their business model. And with their perspective, globally, the infrastructure and supply chain actors will prepare around and in anticipation of them. So clearly for me, the need will not be a regional one, but a global one, because the business is global, and the driver will come from this triangle. And the supply chain and infrastructure companies, which we are part of, will be able, with this perspective, to prepare accordingly.
So we'd have to manage different maturities, but globally.
Exactly.
Karine Guédan, maybe do you have other challenges you want to mention beyond what was already explained here, as you have a central role in this industry?
I think testimony of all our speakers today demonstrates that challenges are quite numerous, and this is why, as private companies, we are also leading the journey in order to create those joint teams, joint efforts in understanding what it means to deploy such complex ecosystem. For each of us, it also means to work beyond our traditional boundaries. We are masters in designing aircraft, some others in airport operations, airlines or investor. It's a unique opportunity for all of us to create together those new competencies that are much needed to make it happen and to make it a reality tomorrow. So the challenges are numerous, but let me, on a pragmatic manner, maybe concentrate on few of them. We said it's about scaling up, and it's about timing. Not only Airbus will bring to market by 2035 the zero-emission aircraft from 100 to 200 seats on commercial operations, but we do have also colleagues in the industry that are ambitioning to bring to market smaller platform by as soon as 2026. So it's tomorrow. Hydrogen is tomorrow. And that's also one of the reasons why we strongly believe in the hydrogen hub concept at airports. Airports is at a central pivotal role to bring and create, consolidate, catalyze all those hydrogen usages, not only for the aircraft when it comes to entry into service, but also to create and transition already all those e-things, light mobility, passenger buses, ground service equipment, to green hydrogen in order not only to decarbonize Scope 3, Scope 1 airport footprint, but as well as starting to scale up the green hydrogen economy we need. And we need that molecule, all of us. It's a common objective. Second is about globally bringing to all the players in this market clarity and certainty. We said it. We've made our own studies. We know it's feasible. We know how, which steps are required. First step by few aircraft coming in, trucks refueling in a first instance. Then we know how also to deploy gaseous hydrogen up to the airport, liquefy it, then engineer full hydrogen plant on the airport. When it comes, it will come to hundreds of tons of consumption in the 2050, 60 onwards. We know it. Now we just need to have all the ecosystem, including the regulators, to bring that clarity and certainty to the investors in order to unlock the investment in order to make it deploying right away.
So you mentioned the investment, the investor. So Matthias Burgart, you are a leader in investing in renewable energy and infrastructure. How can you support, accelerate the development of this dedicated supply chain and accelerate the ramp-up?
Maybe just also mention something which I really noticed when we were working together on augmented infrastructure for some years now. And I think there is a quite significant change Now I think that all the stakeholders of our industry are taking this very seriously. Before that was mainly led by marketing department. I don't have nothing against marketing department, but I think now it's appeared clearly that it's something which is at the core of the strategy, not only at the top management level, this is considered as an absolute priority, but also at operational level, every people thinks that is the driving, I would say, force. And that's, I think, quite new. Things are really, people are really taking it seriously. Second thing, I think, something which always come is that we need to act together. And it's true. I mean, sometimes people say that, well, we need to collaborate, let's collaborate. But I think people are all convinced around the table and in the industry that if we don't do it, we won't reach this, I would say, this common goal, which is, I would say, existentialist for the aircraft industries and aviation industry. So what is our role and what can we contribute? First of all, I think we can obviously channel capital towards energy efficiency. That's the first thing we have to do. We have obviously the fantastic initiative of Clean Hydrogen Infrastructure Fund. I remember first time I spoke about clean hydrogen in my company, people were a little bit surprised. What does it mean? Why clean hydrogen? Maybe in 30 years and 40 years. And we see that this is becoming a reality. And what is incredible of this initiative, first, is obviously the largest fund of infrastructure for clean hydrogen infrastructure, but also how it has been raised. We raised 2 billion in just 1 year. So massive enthusiasm for this fund, which gathers, and that's quite unique as well. It's been sponsored initially not by financiers, but by industrial companies, Air Liquide, Total, Airbus, ADP, but also Plug Power, Lotus, so all international companies willing to act together to create together a fund and then attract financial investors. So I think it's quite unique, and that's also our role, I think, to bring people together and try to set common standards, common objective. That's also the role of Air Carbon. Air Carbon, our vision here is that if we speak the same language, if we set the same standard that we all converge and we agree on, including the priorities, we will be stronger to advocate with regulators, because we haven't spoke that much about regulators, but I believe that, in particular in Europe, they are now lagging a little bit behind. If we see how Americans have acted massively, very focused with the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, where they put very strong, I would say, capital objective, very focused, with a view to reduce carbon emission by 40% by 2030. So it's massive. We need to go this route. And for that, we need to federate people with different tools, like Hy24, with Air Carbon, but there could be other initiatives where we set the same standards. I think that's absolutely the absolute priority for me.
Thank you for all these insights. So that confirm the collaborative approach. HY24 and the fund that will have been raised also confirm that. And probably this common approach will push regulation also to move. Edward Oakright, you stay with me for the third panel, and I'm letting the other speakers getting back to their seat. And many thanks again for this insight. Merci. So we will initiate our third and final panel on the new role of airports. We are today, we've seen that in a context of increased sobriety and pressure on decarbonizing the aviation, so that push the airport to move to augmented one and also to think about new activities. We will talk about intermodality, energy hub, and even beyond that. It's a call also for a collaborative approach, and it's interesting, in this panel we'll have several members of the Olga project, which is a great illustration of an holistic green airport for tomorrow. For this discussion, then I will cite to Edward Oakright, welcome Maxime Mailleux, Armando Brunini, Duncan Walker, Antonio Pellecchia et Rosario Mazza. thanks for your presence here. We'll start this panel with you, Edward Arkwright. We saw in the previous panel how you are engaged in the development and the support of alternative fuels. What is your view on the role of airport, how it could change, which type of new activities, and what are the challenges you see and how you can finance this transformation?
So the future of an airport today is energy and railway. Sorry for aviation. And my best friend is now train. And so we know that if we want to face the challenge that we are discussing since the beginning of this morning, we have to welcome intermodality in our airport much more than it is. Of course, around the world, you all have some examples of airport well connected by rail, airport with intermodality proposal, but it is not the case. It is not the case in Europe in all the airports, and for ADP we have some room to improvement. And so we are fully engaged in this intermodality strategy, and the main challenge for us is to finance this intermodality strategy. Clearly, aviation is in Europe a 100% self-financed business. Railway is a 50 to 60% state finance or public finance business. So we have two business models which are completely different, and we know that we have to work together in order to find solutions. To welcome this intermodality, to make it a reality because our customer want it and because it is a great strength for our business. One day, we will have some new laws, new regulation forbidding the use of airplanes 2 hours and a half, 3 hours, 4 hours, I don't know what. So we know that this decarbonization strategy requires a lot of investment in intermodality. I will explain to you all the examples and all what we have done in Paris, but just to begin this panel, the question is how can we finance it? We can finance it by new revenues, of course. And of course, the revenues that all our airports have in terms of parks and use of roads will be under pressure. Because if I have to reduce the part of the passengers coming at the airport by cars and to replace them by train, I have to create revenue from these passengers arriving by train. So I can do it by retail, I can do it by a lot of ideas. But intermodality is also a new way to connect airport to the city, and with Duncan. We will open tomorrow the first vertiport fully integrated in an aeronautical environment in Pontoise, just close to there, because we are convinced that this VTOL and new urban mobility that we call advanced air mobility will create a new opportunity of businesses that will allow us to make this intermodality strategy a reality.
So as you mentioned, Edward Arkwright, tomorrow you will inaugurate the first vertiport in Paris with Duncan Walker. You are founder and CEO of Skyport. You're also collaborating with Milan to have vertiport ready for the Winter Olympic Games. So can you elaborate, tell us more about the benefits of eVTOL and what will be the time horizon for the deployment?
Yeah, of course. I'm lucky we're talking about the funding of this industry. To have a number of our shareholders here, Group ADP were one of our very first shareholders. Ardian joined the capital table very recently. And what we do is provide ground infrastructure for the eVTOL market. Now, not everyone might be familiar with this new market. eVTOL stands for electrical vertical takeoff and landing vehicles. So effectively the electrification of helicopters. Now, helicopters are noisy, they're somewhat dangerous, they're very expensive, they spend a lot of time in maintenance. So why would you try and replace something like that with a form of transport that is electric? Well, electric brings a lot of benefits. It brings, of course, the environmental benefit, but with multiple points of redundancy, they're very materially safer. And really importantly for the airports here and all of the other transportation sectors, this should be a high volume industry that is accessible to everybody in this room, not the super rich that can afford to fly around in helicopters, but everyone traveling to and from an airport. Now, of course, for that to be useful, you've got to have a point of origin and a point of departure, destination. And airports, if you look at how people move around any city in the world, airports are key drivers of traffic in and out. And connectivity to those airports isn't always great. So what do? We build ground infrastructure at airports with our partners here, but also in city centres so people can move to the places they need to be, typically the most congested most congested places in those cities, so city centre, downtown, to those airports. Like Edouard said, tomorrow we're launching the first one in Europe. This feels like a journey we've been on for a very long time because it's dependent upon vehicle certification, which is a challenge. But tomorrow, first vertiport in Europe, we will be doing live flights tomorrow in Paris, which is super exciting. So this is an industry that has been talked about for a while. It is an assistant. It's not going to solve everybody's problems in one go, but it's an assistant to the decarbonisation of that intermodal challenge. Still there? Yeah. That challenge of moving people to and from the city centres. So, by 2024, you will see commercial operations in Paris, super exciting, likely to be the first in Europe. Hopefully by 2026, we will be seeing that also in northern Italy with some of the Milan airports. And that will feed, the catalyst for that is the Olympics here in Paris, and then the Winter Olympics in Milan and northern Italy. That's all right. The grand finale with a new one. So it's close, it's happening. You will see live flights in Paris tomorrow. You're welcome to come if you're available. And I'll let Armando talk a little bit more about that. But this is a form of helping that downtown to airport traffic and regional transportation as battery energy density increases.
Thank you. So you mentioned you are collaborating with Milan Airport. Armando Bruni, you are CEO of ACA, heading the Milan Airport. Could you explain what eVTOL represents in terms of benefits for you, better accessibility, new revenue? And more generally, you have a strong strategy on renewable. Can you explain what is your view on the electrification as a key lever of decarbonization?
Sure. We see clear benefits of enabling urban mobility in the Milan area. One was said already by Duncan, so it's helping mobility to and from the airports become more sustainable. That is quite clear. I don't think I need to expand on that. We also see it as a new business, a potential new business, so a new source of revenues. And we all know how much we need new sources of revenues right now in this historical phase for airports. And then finally, these last 2-3 years have been really tough for airports. We've had COVID, which hit us hard, and now the war and the energy bill surging. And so it's been a lot about cost cutting. So this project, it's like a flagship project looking into the future, which is also good for morale. It's good for our people, especially for the younger component of our staff, to see something futuristic and positive. We're very serious about it. We've been studying now 2 years. We did our homework. We did a full-fledged demand analysis, so looking 2 decades forward in Milan and Greater Milan area. And that's not easy because it's not easy to estimate the demand of something which is not there, of a market which still doesn't exist. We also worked on a master plan, positioning where we believe vertiports should be positioned geographically, the best positions in terms of demand, in terms of intermodality with other modes of transport. So ultimately, we believe that end game, we will see 15 plus vertiports between our airports, the city of Milan, and the greater region of Lombardy. More concretely, we have a business plan. We are going to create a NewCo, a joint venture company, to exploit this business opportunity. It will happen in the next few months. Hopefully, Skyports will be an important partner. They have a board meeting. We have a board meeting next month.
You're on the board.
Yeah. Representing Ardian, by the way. And I must say, this happened thanks to Ardian and Aéroport de Paris. So it's about collaboration. This all sparkled thanks to your connections. And so Ardian will be an important partner in this as well, indirectly, and with Skyports and ourselves. And the idea is to be cautious in the beginning, because we don't know how long it will take for this new industry to ramp up. And so by 2026, we are aiming at developing 4 vertiports, 2 in our airports and 2 downtown. And in the beginning, basically, the service will be commuting between, especially Malpensa, which is far from the city, and the city center. This is the idea. Then, of course, if demand responds, we're in a good position to scale up quickly and also to look beyond Milan, maybe leveraging on airport assets that our shareholders have in other parts of Italy. I don't know if I have time to reply to the...
We will come back to
we'll
come back to the intermodality and the other initiatives that you have. Many thanks, Armando. Maxime Mailleux, you are CEO of Smart Airport System, and you are also part of the Olga project with ADP and Milan Airport. So very nice to have all of you on board. Can you explain what your initiative on zero-grade emission help airline to both be efficient operationally and reduce their emission? And what are the main challenges to scale up such solution?
Yes, good morning. So first, maybe a quick clarification of what we mean when we talk about zero ground emissions. Basically, if we look at the total emissions generated in an airport, 30% of the emissions are coming from the turbine used wrongly on the ground. So when we talk about the turbine, first the APU, auxiliary power unit at the gate, and then the main engines during the taxi. So 30% of the total airport emissions are coming from these 2 elements. And this is what we tackle with our company and with our partners as part of Olga, as you mentioned. So we address these 2 issues, and we address them today. So I see a lot of solutions, obviously, for decarbonizing the aviation for, in the mid and long term. But those solutions are available today. And so we can address a big portion of the emissions today. That's what we do in Paris. We do that worldwide, in Latin America, in the US. So, of course, we have challenges. The APU has been used worldwide since the aviation exists. And in fact, it's quite easy to tackle. Okay, it's a combination of factors that you need. It's not only a machine. It's not only a specific service. It's a combination of factors, but it's possible to tackle this today. Taxiing, we all queued, a very long time, especially in New York, when, in fact, you can address this today with the TaxiBot, and this is what we are demonstrating with our partners, with ADP as part of the Olga project next year, with Schiphol Airport in Amsterdam, also in Bangalore airports. We have TaxiBot, running today and making sure that we don't use the main engines during the taxi. So again, these solutions are available, and they respond also to operational efficiency gains at airports. I will just name one example with the TaxiBot. When you push back for your aircraft, basically, after the pushback, you need to wait normally 3 to 4 minutes, the warm-up sequence of the main engines. With the TaxiBot, you tackle that because immediately after the pushback, the control is transferred to the pilot, and the pilot is allowed to tow immediately and directly the aircraft. So this also helps to remove congestion at the gates, at the airports. And that's helping airports in another way than only removing emissions. So again, the last thing I want to say is that I hear a lot of solutions, and hydrogen, obviously, is the way to go, SAF. They are all costing a lot of money. But tackling the turbine on the ground today is free. In fact, it's not even free. It has a negative cost because we generate savings and we bring revenues. So there is nothing not to do it. I mean, it's a combination of factors, so it's very important that airports, they understand that. It's not only buying an air conditioning machine that will not make you stop the APU. That's for sure. Because a lot of airports, they did that. You see a lot of air conditioners, and they are not used. So that's not sufficient. We know what it needs. Addressing the taxiing, also, the TaxiBot is today the only certified solution. Okay, it's available. It's not so complex. Sometimes I'm told by a lot of airports, deploying a TaxiBot is kind of complicated. But when I hear all the other solutions here and how complex they are, I can tell you that the taxi bot is most likely the most easiest solution to deploy at an airport. So again, we are here to support the aviation, and the taxi bot is being conceived a long time ago. It is now in operation, and we are accelerating the movement. So we need your support from the decision makers at airports, at airline, with Air France, KLM, working with us, tackling those issues. So I think for us, our time is not in 10 years. Our time is between now and in the next 5 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Maxime. So we have here both operational efficiency, reduction of emission for negative cost. And to continue on electrification, Antonio Pellecchia, you are Managing Director of ASG Superconductors. So can you explain how superconductivity can be a key technology for electric aviation? What are the gains in terms of efficiency, and what are your clients today?
Absolutely. So first of all, thank you very much for having me. Outstanding panel. So let me spend one word about superconductivity. Probably many of you are not familiar with it. First of all, you do two things with superconductivity. You do either magnets or you convey energy. Why this? Because superconductors are materials that can conduct currents without losses, without ohmic resistance. So at this point, what you want to do, it's either a very powerful magnet. You know, every one of you has probably been in an MRI scanner where you are inches away from superconducting materials. Or the ITER project here in France, in Marseille, or you can convey energy. As long as you keep superconductors cold, you can keep any amount of current flowing through it without any losses. So you can have a gigawatt conveyance line, probably the size of this mic. How does this apply possibly to airports and decarbonization? Well, I see two ranges of applications. Airside, you can power up having DC current streamlined at 100,000 amps probably to very fast charge to the ground support equipment or conveyor belts or to the same aircraft if you want, guaranteeing very fast recharging rates. Landside, you can power up any of the facilities inside the terminals. And this with a conductor which is very compact, so no civil works. A conductor trench is usually the size of probably 60 centimeters in width. You can remove the power source from the airport because the conductor line can go without any civil works for kilometers. Actually, one single superconducting cable can substitute like 15 or 20 copper standard conductors. And plus, you can have a number of applications that do benefit from the avoidance of losses. For example, if you are kilometers away with the power generation, you won't get to the airport like 70% of the energy you buy, but you will get the 100% of it. So I see a number of very bright application in the future for this. We have business cases for ports. Ships will be powered in the future by hydrogen. But Pierre-Etienne and Karim before were right. You're not going to do much without an infrastructure. Actually, we can couple the superconducting material and the cryogenics of it with liquid hydrogen. In this way, you can convey in a mixed up way current and hydrogen to whatever load you want to use. So you will have a synergistic use of both materials, and you will reduce the carbon footprint in many, many ways. Consider just of the thousands of tons of copper you will save.
So we have here, we go beyond the aviation sector again with synergy with other application and other sector. I'll come back to you, Armando, on the intermodality. You start to explain what you try to do, notably with Vertiport, but you have a lot of other initiatives to connect Milan Airport to the city. Where are you today in this journey, and what is your vision on the role of airport as intermodal hub?
Yes, well, as Edward was saying, we all have space to improve, and for sure, the Milan system has a space to improve in terms of connecting rail to our infrastructure. But luckily, in the next month, two big initiatives will take place. The first one is that on the 26th of November, we will open a new metro line from the city center to Linate. So Linate will be the terminal of this new line. And so it's going to be a big game changer because Linate is our city airport, and in 10 minutes you will be able to reach the city center. The other initiative is that after many years of lots of work on the authorization process and on financing process, the first stone will be posed for a rail link between Malpensa and the northern rail network of Italy. And this will, when it's finished, it will boost capacity, frequencies, and speed of services with the northern part of Italy and with Switzerland. We have a major component of our passengers come from Lugano and from Switzerland. So two big projects that will help push on the modal shift. We're working on the modal shift like everybody else, and these two projects will certainly give a boost and help us. In terms of the role, I think that we all have the same vision, all airports have the same vision. We're becoming not only infrastructures for flights and for aircraft and for passengers flying, but we are becoming, because of our position and because we interlink all modes of traffic, we are becoming and evolving into platforms of intermodality. And not only, I'll give you a real life example of what could happen where flying is not involved. As I was saying before, the metro station is going to come, and because the municipality believes that it will attract the Milan metro station, the Linate metro station, will attract commuters from over Linate. This means we bought a new parking lot. So we bought land. This land is going to be a new parking lot for commuters. So what we will see in the future is commuters that today are using their car to move into the city and work, and they pollute and they create congestion. Tomorrow they will stop at our parking lots, then we'll take the metro station, commute to Milan, come back in the evening, use our super fast recharging station, which we created for electrical cars with partners from the highway system, and then go back home. So basically their trip to work will be sustainable, and we will be making revenues from parking and from recharging electrical cars, and there will be no flights involved. So we see intermodality going again beyond just aviation.
Edward Oakright, I don't know if you want to add something with the TGV station at your airport on what Armando mentioned.
Yes, we have exactly the same vision. We are lucky in Paris because the most difficult has been already decided. Today in CDG, you have 10% of the OND passengers coming by train at the airport. When I say train, it is TGV and a train inside Paris. So everything will be improved. CDG Express, direct train from CDG to Paris, open beginning 2026. Line 17, new metro line, open around 2030. New Roissy-Picardie, which is a new train coming from the north, already decided and opening around 2027. The capacity of the high-speed train will be increased by 50%, and right now we have room to double the number of passengers coming from high-speed trains. So all the most difficult in our congested countries and cities which are new railway infrastructures has been already decided in CDG and also in Orly with the opening on the new metro line 14 in June 2024. It will be a metro station inside the airport, and the new 18-1 coming from Paris-Saclay and in 2028 and in 2023, also 2032, yes, in Versailles. So sorry for this long description, but the most difficult has been done. So we have to do the rest, which is to increase the size of the station. CDG2 will be completely renewed and refurbished for the Olympic Games in 2024. And the size of this station will triple in the next 20 years, double in the next 10 years, and triple in the next 20 years. And we have to work with our customers, especially with train operators and, of course, airlines, on how to make the passenger experience as good as possible, as seamless as possible. Air France and SNCF have made a lot of progress, and a digital now ticket, which has been announced by the management of these two companies, and we have to review the timetable, we have to review the regulation, we have to review all the passenger experience, but it is our job, and thanks to that, we will able to move from today, 2/3 of the passengers come by road, which is a nonsense, to 50%, which means a more balanced approach, and of course more consistent with our common targets.
Thank you. To conclude this panel, I will give you the voice. Rosario Mazzia, you are head of Ardian Infrastructure in Italy. As an investor, how do you help your portfolio companies to make this move? We also see more porosity between sector, infrastructure, mobility, energy, even real estate sometimes. So what does it mean in terms of business model for you as an investor? And do you think it increases the resilience of this asset?
Thank you. Good morning. I think it's clear that we are a long-term and active investor in the sectors, and if we want to continue to play this role, we need to have the decarbonization, and we need to scale the challenge of the decarbonization and make it a reality. You ask, how do we do it? I think today we have discussed, and I want to summarize probably 3 concepts which for me are important for looking at the industry going forwards. Is first, ecosystems, second is scalability, and third is also innovation. I think as airports play a pivotal role in building a strong ecosystem of partners which shares the same vision and the same goal, the same view of the industry. And today, collaboration is not a nice thing to have anymore. It's a necessity if we want to make this happen, and if we want to make it at scale. And when we look at the industry, we are not just talking about airport and airlines. Today we had technology providers, manufacturers, we have energy companies, we have ground services, and also you have investors as well that play a role. And it's also important to go beyond aviation. And that's what we have done in Ardian. I think 2 years ago we have established an Ardian Sustainability Transport Working Group, which involves 6 of our portfolio companies in the transport industry. Milan is part of the group, but we also have highways operators, we have railway operators, because this is a challenge for the entire industry. And if you want to achieve the mass and the scale, you need to have the collaboration extended beyond the boundaries of the aviation. And the goal of this group is to share best practice in terms of decarbonization, to enhance collaborations, and also to define actionable plans and actually even joint development projects among themselves. Second, I mentioned scalability. I think as Ardian, we see ourselves as a network, and we can help scale developments from a single airport to a network. Duncan and Armando mentioned that before. And it's also an example of the ecosystem. I mean, we got an inbound from ADP about Duncan Ventures. And at the same time, I was discussing with Armando about his vision to transform the airport as an intermodality hub. And we made the connection. And there, today, we are looking at opening possibly the first vertiport by 2026 in Milan. And also, thanks to the network we have in the country, we can expand that venture, not just in Milan, but also across the country, across Italy. And so we share also experience, knowledge, and also we accelerate, because you build up on real examples and people that have put effort and resources. Last is innovation. We are in a challenging environment. We had pandemic, now we have energy crisis, and we see the target to decarbonize the industry. We need to innovate business models, and we need to innovate and come up with new ideas that can generate also new sources of revenues, because it cannot be just a cost. If it's a cost, then it won't be profitable. And so won't be worth making an investment. And that's how probably today we figure out that airports are not just, as was mentioned before, a place where people travel. It's actually, today airports are an energy hub. They need to develop into a place where you have SAF. We discussed about hydrogen. We didn't discuss and touch base about renewable energy because it's a big cost for the airports. And so today airports are thinking how to become independent and produce energy themselves, how to develop energy efficiency program for the building, some of them really outdated. Second, it's also a hub of people, intermodality, how to smooth the travel in and out of the city, how it can be, it can facilitate and create decarbonized travels, but also it's a hub of data, the airports. And so we need to think about new tools, air carbon, and how we can optimize operation, but also create new opportunities. And also ourselves, as investors, we are evolving in terms of our approach to the market. We are launching new product that can answer the question of the financeability of this investment. And so we launched the Hydrogen Fund. We have also made a small investment in Duncan. So we see ourselves also as the habilitator of this development.
Many thanks, Rosario. You made a great conclusion for the panel, but also a wrap-up of all the panels. So we have a good view of the combination needed to scale on this subject and reach the 2050 target. Many thanks for your contribution. I'm letting you going back to your seat and conclude this conference. So I would like to thank, of course, all the panelists of these three panels. It was very rich and very interesting to see how the collaboration is here. It was very important for us to share this conviction that the approach should be ecosystemic. To conclude this conference, I'm welcoming again Pauline Thompson from Ardian on the scene.
Thank you, Axel. I would like to just warmly thank again all the participants today for sharing their inspiring initiatives. When we worked on the study and on this conference, we realized that in an ideal scenario, all of these initiatives would be supported by a coordinated government action at an international level in order to unlock new potentials and also get out of the prisoner's dilemma, which has obviously led some private and public players in the past to prefer taking the passenger seat and rather than the driving seat in the decarbonization of the economy. Today, for the aviation industry, I mean, we don't know the results of the COP27 that is going on today, but the aviation industry needs to decarbonize now, and it's reassuring to see that we can already do it. Of course, it requires massive level of investments, innovation, and coordinated efforts. But that's good news for us because we're investors. And we believe that the airports can and should lead the way. So thank you, Axel, for leading us through this conference. Thank you to the Ardian teams, which have worked on this conference with us. And thank you all for joining us today, either physically or online. If you're here physically with us, there's a coffee waiting for you downstairs. And the studies are at the entrance or available online. Thank you.
Thanks.